I've never felt so alive as I do now telling you this story. It's like I'm reliving every moment, every emotion. But let me start from the beginning, because you need to understand how perfect everything seemed before it all fell apart. Picture this. I'm Emma Thompson, 31 years old, and I've got it all figured out. I'm a successful nutritionist with a thriving practice, and I'm married to Kevin, my college sweetheart. He's 33, works in IT, and he's everything I ever wanted in a husband. Tall, handsome, and with a smile that could light up a room. We live in a cozy apartment downtown, and our life together is like something out of a romantic comedy. Every morning, we have breakfast together. I make him these green smoothies. Yeah, I know, typical nutritionist, right? But he loves them, says they give him energy for the whole day. And every night, we curl up on the couch and watch our favorite shows together. It's our little ritual, you know. But it's not just the little things. Kevin's always been so supportive of my career. When I was struggling to build my client base, he encouraged me to keep going. He even helped me set up my website and social media accounts. I remember thinking, how did I get so lucky? Oh, and get this, last year, for our anniversary, he surprised me with a weekend getaway to this amazing spa resort. It was like he could read my mind, always knowing exactly what I needed. I felt like the luckiest woman in the world. I guess that's why I never saw it coming. How could I? Everything was so perfect. We were that couple that everyone envied. You know, the ones who still held hands after years of marriage, who finished each other's sentences. We had our whole future planned out. Kids, a house in the suburbs, maybe even a dog. I remember this one day, just a few months ago. We were at a friend's barbecue, and Kevin had his arm around me the whole time. He kept whispering jokes in my ear, making me laugh. On the way home, he turned to me and said, "Emma, you're the best thing that ever happened to me." God, thinking about it now makes me want to cry. But you know what? Despite all of this, despite how perfect everything seemed, I did something that probably saved me from years of more heartache. I started a gratitude journal. Every night, I'd write down 3 things I was grateful for. It sounds cheesy, I know, but it really helped me appreciate what I had. Little did I know, this journal would become my lifeline in the months to come. It would remind me of my strength, of all the good things in my life that had nothing to do with Kevin. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's the thing about life, isn't it? Just when you think you've got it all figured out, just when you think you're living your happily ever after, life has a way of throwing you a curveball. And let me tell you, the curveball that was coming my way, it was a doozy. But here's the kicker. As perfect as everything seemed, as happy as I thought I was, looking back now, I realized that I was selling myself short. I was defining my happiness, my worth, through my relationship with Kevin. I didn't know it then, but I was about to embark on a journey of self-discovery that would change everything. So there you have it, the beginning of my story. The calm before the storm, as they say. But trust me, what comes next? It's going to make you question everything you think you know about love, trust, and the strength of the human spirit. Because let me tell you, I had no idea how strong I really was. No idea at all. It all started with little things. You know? The kind of stuff you'd normally brush off without a second thought. But looking back, I can see how these tiny details were the first cracks in what I thought was our perfect life. Kevin had always been a bit of a workaholic, but suddenly he was working from home more often. At first, I was thrilled. More time together, right? Wrong. He'd shut himself in our spare room-turned office for hours on end. When I'd pop in to bring him a snack or just say hi, he'd quickly minimize whatever was on his screen. Just work stuff, he'd say with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I remember this one time. I walked in and he slammed his laptop shut so fast you'd think it was on fire. When I asked what he was doing, he mumbled something about a surprise project at work. "Can't have you seeing it and spoiling the surprise for everyone," he said with a wink. I laughed it off, but something didn't sit right. Then there were the late night meetings. Kevin started having these video calls at odd hours. He'd say it was because of time differences with international clients. Makes sense, right? But why did he always take these calls in the bathroom with the shower running? I tried to rationalize it all. It's just a new company policy, I told myself. They're probably expanding globally. But then why didn't he ever talk about it? Kevin used to love sharing stories about his work, but now, radio silence. One night, I woke up to find his side of the bed empty. It was 2 a.m. I found him in the kitchen, furiously typing on his phone. When he saw me, he nearly dropped it. Couldn't sleep, he said. Thought I'd catch up on some emails. Since when did Kevin answer work emails in the middle of the night? And then there were the changes in his behavior, little things, barely noticeable at first. He started working out more, buying new clothes. He even changed his cologne. When I complimented him on it, he just shrugged and said he felt like a change. But the thing that really got to me, the way he'd smile at his phone. You know that smile, right? The one that lights up your whole face? The one he used to have when he looked at me? Yeah, that one. Now it was reserved for whatever, or whoever, was on his screen. I started feeling, I don't know, invisible, like I was living with a stranger. We used to talk for hours about everything and nothing. Now, our conversations felt forced, superficial. When I'd try to dig deeper, he'd deflect with a joke or suddenly remember an urgent email he had to send. One Saturday morning, I suggested we go for brunch at our favorite cafe. It used to be our weekend tradition. Kevin hesitated, then said he had to go into the office on a Saturday. When I pointed out how unusual that was, he got defensive. "Why are you questioning me?" he snapped. "Don't you trust me?" Trust. That word hit me like a punch to the gut. Of course I trusted him. He was my husband, my best friend, my partner. We'd built our life together on a foundation of trust. So why did that question make me feel so uneasy? I pushed these thoughts away. I was being paranoid, right? Kevin loved me. We were happy. This was just a rough patch, probably stress from work. Every couple goes through this, I told myself. But no matter how much I tried to ignore it, that nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach wouldn't go away. It was like a tiny voice whispering, "Something's not right." I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, wondering what was happening to us. I started paying more attention to Kevin's habits. The way he'd angle his phone away from me when texting. How he'd step outside to take certain calls. The sudden, guys, nights out, that seemed to be happening more frequently. But every time I'd start to voice my concerns, Kevin would do something sweet. He'd bring me flowers, just because, or surprise me with tickets to a show I'd mentioned wanting to see months ago. And I'd think, "See, everything's fine. He loves you. You're just being silly." Looking back, I realize I was in denial. I didn't want to see what was right in front of me, because admitting something was wrong meant facing the possibility that my perfect life wasn't so perfect after all. But deep down, I knew something had changed. The Kevin I knew, the man I married, was slipping away, and I was left grasping at straws, trying to hold on to a relationship that was already starting to crumble. Little did I know, these small suspicions were just the beginning. The real storm was yet to come, and it would shake the very foundation of everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, and myself. You know how they say hindsight is 20/20? Well, let me tell you, it's true. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. The signs were all there, screaming at me, but I guess I just wasn't ready to listen. It was about 3 months after I first noticed Kevin acting strange. By then, his behavior had gone from slightly odd to downright suspicious. The late nights at work became more frequent. He'd come home smelling of cologne, not his usual brand, mind you, and sometimes, I swear I could smell perfume on his shirts. One night, I decided to wait up for him. It was nearly midnight when he finally walked through the door. "Hey, you're still up," he said, surprise clear in his voice. I nodded, trying to keep my tone casual as I asked about his day. He gave me some vague answer about a project deadline, but his eyes wouldn't meet mine. "Who were you working with?" I asked, hoping my voice didn't betray my suspicions. He hesitated for a split second before answering. "Oh, just the usual team. You know, Mike, Sarah, that new guy Tom." I nodded, but my heart was racing. Sarah. He'd never mentioned a Sarah before. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I decided to drop by his office with lunch, something I used to do regularly but hadn't in months. As I approached his floor, I saw him standing by the elevator with a woman I didn't recognize. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting on his arm just a little too long to be purely friendly. When Kevin saw me, his face went pale. "Emma, what are you doing here?" I held up the bag of takeout, forcing a smile. "I thought I'd surprise you with lunch." The woman, Sarah, I presumed, quickly excused herself. Kevin ushered me into his office, but the lunch was tense and awkward. He barely touched his food and kept checking his phone. After that day, things got worse. Kevin started picking fights over the smallest things. One night, he exploded because I'd forgotten to buy his favorite cereal. Another time, he stormed out of the house because I asked if he wanted to watch a movie together. I started noticing other changes too. He'd lock his phone with a new passcode. His social media accounts were suddenly set to private. And then there was the mysterious charge on our credit card statement, a hefty sum at a high-end jewelry store. When I asked him about it, he got defensive. "It was supposed to be a surprise for you," he snapped. "I'd way to ruin it." But my birthday had passed months ago and our anniversary wasn't for another 6 months. Something didn't add up. I started losing sleep, tossing and turning as my mind raced with possibilities. Was I imagining things? Was I the problem? Maybe I was just being paranoid. But then why did my gut keep screaming at me that something was wrong? One Saturday morning, Kevin said he had to go into the office again. As he was getting ready, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. Before he could grab it, I caught a glimpse of the notification. It was a message from S with a heart emoji. My heart sank. "Who's S?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Kevin snatched the phone away. "Just a coworker," he muttered. "It's probably about the project we're working on." But I couldn't shake the image of that heart emoji from my mind. Coworkers don't send each other heart emojis, do they? That night, after Kevin had gone to bed, I sat in our living room staring at our wedding photo. We looked so happy, so in love. Where had that couple gone? When had we become these strangers living under the same roof? I thought about confronting him, demanding answers. But what if I was wrong? What if this was all just a big misunderstanding? The thought of accusing him of cheating made me feel sick to my stomach. What if I was throwing away our marriage over nothing? But then I remembered the late nights, the secret phone calls, the new passwords, the mystery jewelry purchase. It all added up to something I didn't want to face. I went to bed that night with a heavy heart, my mind made up. I couldn't go on like this, constantly second-guessing everything. I needed answers, and I was going to get them, one way or another. Little did I know, my decision that night would set in motion a chain of events that would turn my whole world upside down. The Emma who went to bed that night was about to embark on a journey she never expected, one that would test her in ways she never imagined. But you know what? Looking back now, I realized that night was the beginning of my awakening. It was the moment I decided to stop being a passive observer in my own life and start taking control. And let me tell you, what came next? It wasn't pretty, but it was necessary. Because sometimes you need to walk through the fire to come out stronger on the other side. All right, so there I was, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with a million thoughts. I knew I had to do something, but where do you even start when you suspect your husband might be cheating? It's not like they teach you this stuff in school, you know. I started small. The next morning, after Kevin left for work, I began my own little investigation. I felt like a character in one of those crime shows we used to watch together. Funny how life imitates art, huh? First stop, his dresser. I hate to admit it, but I went through his pockets. Found a few receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. Expensive places, definitely not the kind of joints he'd take me to. One of them had a lipstick mark on it. My heart sank. I don't wear that shade of red. Next, I checked his browser history on our shared computer. Clean as a whistle. Too clean, if you ask me. It's like he'd wiped it completely. Who does that unless they have something to hide, right? I even stooped so low as to sniff his clothes. God, I felt pathetic doing it, but I had to know, and there it was, that faint scent of perfume. Not mine. Floral, with a hint of vanilla. I used to joke that I could recognize Kevin's smell anywhere. Turns out, I could recognize when he smelled like someone else, too. But the real kicker, his phone. It was like Fort Knox. New passcode, apps I'd never seen before. He'd even turned off notifications on the lock screen. I tried guessing the code. Our anniversary, his birthday, my birthday, nothing. It was like he'd locked away a part of his life, and I wasn't invited. I sat there, holding his phone, feeling like a stranger in my own home. Was this what our marriage had come to? Me snooping around like some kind of detective? I felt sick to my stomach, but I couldn't stop. I needed to know the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I called in sick to work and decided to follow him. Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but desperate times call for desperate measures, right? I parked my car a block away from his office and waited. Hours ticked by. I felt like the world's worst spy, munching on stale granola bars and trying not to look suspicious. Finally, around lunchtime, I saw him. He came out of the building, but he wasn't alone. There she was, Sarah. I recognized her from that day at the office. They were laughing, walking close together. Too close. They went to a nearby cafe. Through the window, I could see them sitting at a corner table, heads bent close, talking intently. At one point, Sarah reached out and touched Kevin's hand. He didn't pull away. I felt like I was watching a movie of someone else's life. This couldn't be happening to me, right? But there it was, playing out right in front of my eyes. They spent over an hour in that cafe. When they came out, Kevin gave Sarah a quick hug. It looked intimate, familiar, like they'd done it 100 times before. I followed them back to the office, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Part of me wanted to march right up to them and confront them both. But what would I say? Hey, honey, surprise! I've been stalking you all day. Instead, I drove home, my mind a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, hurt, confusion, they all battled for dominance. By the time I got home, I was a mess. I barely made it through the door before the tears started falling. I spent the rest of the afternoon curled up on our couch. The same couch where we used to snuggle and watch movies. Now it felt cold, unfamiliar. I scrolled through our photos on my phone, looking at our smiling faces. When did it all go wrong? How did we get here? When Kevin came home that evening, he acted like nothing was wrong. He kissed me on the cheek, asked about my day. I wanted to scream, to throw his phone at him and demand answers, but I held it in. I smiled, said work was fine. I was a good actress, it seemed. Or maybe he just wasn't paying attention. That night, as we lay in bed, miles apart despite being inches from each other, I made a decision. I couldn't confront him. Not yet. I needed more proof, concrete evidence that even he couldn't deny. So, I started planning. I'd become a private investigator in my own home. I'd uncover the truth, no matter what it took. Because the not knowing, that was killing me more than any truth could. Little did I know. My amateur sleuthing was about to uncover more than I ever bargained for. The rabbit hole I was about to go down. It was deep, dark, and full of surprises. But I was ready. Or at least, I thought I was. Looking back now, I realized that day was a turning point. It was the day I stopped being a victim and started taking control of my life. It wasn't pretty, and it sure as hell wasn't easy, but it was necessary, because sometimes the only way out is through. and I was about to go through hell and back to find my way out. So there I was, playing detective in my own marriage. Let me tell you, it's not as exciting as the movies make it out to be. It's more like a roller coaster of hope and despair, with a generous side of paranoia. I started small, you know. I'd casually check Kevin's phone when he left it lying around, but it was always locked tight. I even tried guessing his new password. Our anniversary. Nope. His birthday. Not a chance. The day we met, please. It was like trying to crack a safe with a plastic spoon. Then, I had this brilliant idea to check our shared cloud storage. Surely, if he was hiding something, I'd find it there. Right? Wrong. It was squeaky clean. Too clean, if you ask me. It's like he'd gone through and sanitized everything. Who does that unless they've got something to hide? One day, while Kevin was in the shower, I managed to sneak a peek at his laptop. The browser history was clear, but I noticed he'd been using incognito mode a lot. For work, he said. Yeah, right. Since when does analyzing data require secret browsing? I even stooped so low as to check the pockets of his pants before doing laundry. Found a few crumpled receipts from restaurants I'd never heard of. Expensive places, too. Definitely not the kind of joints he'd take me to. But hey, maybe he was just treating his co-workers, right? That's what I told myself. Anyway, the breaking point came when I found a small jewelry box hidden in the back of his desk drawer. My heart raced as I opened it, half expecting to find a diamond necklace or something equally damning. Instead, it was empty, just a velvet-lined box with nothing inside. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more suspicious. "What are you doing?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. Kevin was standing in the doorway, his face a mix of confusion and, was that anger? I was looking for a pen, I stammered, feeling like a kid caught with her hand in the cookie jar. He didn't buy it. We had a huge fight that night. He accused me of not trusting him, of invading his privacy. I fired back, asking why he needed so much privacy in a marriage. It ended with him storming out and me crying myself to sleep. The next morning, he apologized, said he'd been under a lot of stress at work. He even offered to take me out to dinner that weekend to make up for it. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him so badly. But the doubt was there, gnawing at me. Every time his phone buzzed, I'd tense up. Every late night at the office became suspect. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize, suspicious, paranoid, always on edge. Then came the day I thought I'd finally caught him red-handed. I was doing laundry and found a lipstick stain on the collar of one of his white shirts. My heart stopped. This was it, the smoking gun I'd been looking for. With shaking hands, I confronted him that evening. "Care to explain this?" I said, holding up the shirt. Kevin looked at it, then back at me, confusion written all over his face. "Oh, that must be from when Janet hugged me at the office party last week. Remember, I told you about it. Janet, his boss, the one who always wore bright red lipstick, the one who was happily married with 3 kids. I felt like an idiot. Of course, it was Janet. How could I have forgotten about the office party? Kevin had even invited me to go, but I declined, too tired after a long day at work. "I'm so sorry," I mumbled, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. I don't know what I thought. Kevin pulled me into a hug. "Emma, what's going on? Talk to me." And just like that, all my suspicions came tumbling out. The late nights, the locked phone, the mysterious Sarah from the office. I told him everything, expecting him to get angry, to storm out again. Instead, he listened, really listened. When I was done, he took my hands in his. "Emma, I had no idea you were feeling this way," he said softly. "I've been working on a big project at work. It's confidential, that's why I couldn't talk about it. Sarah's part of the team. There's nothing going on between us, I swear." He even offered to show me his phone, his emails, everything. But I stopped him. I realized then that I didn't want proof. I wanted trust. I wanted my marriage back. That night, we talked for hours, really talked like we used to. We laughed, we cried, we made promises to communicate better. For the first time in months, I felt hope. As I lay in bed that night, Kevin's arm around me, I thought maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. We'd hit a rough patch, but we'd come out stronger. Oh, how wrong I was. Because sometimes, the moment you think you're safe, that's when the real storm hits. And let me tell you, the storm that was coming, it was a Category 5 hurricane, and I was standing right in its path. You know that saying, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Well, let me tell you, I was about to be the biggest fool of all. After that night of heartfelt confessions and renewed promises, I really thought things were looking up. Kevin was more attentive, more present. We were talking again, really talking. For a while, it felt like we were newlyweds, rediscovering each other all over again. But you know that nagging feeling in the pit of your stomach, the one that tells you something's not quite right, even when everything seems perfect? Yeah, that feeling never really went away. I tried to ignore it. I mean, Kevin had explained everything, right? The late nights, the secretive behavior, it was all for this big, confidential project at work. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. But then, little things started happening again. Kevin would snap his laptop shut whenever I walked into the room. He'd take phone calls in hushed tones, always stepping outside where I couldn't hear. And that Sarah from work? She was suddenly popping up in conversation a lot more than I was comfortable with. I found myself falling back into old habits, checking his phone when he wasn't looking, scrolling through his emails, even rifling through his pockets again. But this time, I was smarter about it. I didn't leave any traces. One day, while Kevin was in the shower, I managed to unlock his phone. He'd changed the password again, but this time, I'd been watching. 4 digits. The same 4 digits he always used for everything. I held my breath as I typed them in. Click. The phone unlocked. My hands were shaking as I opened his messages. There it was, a conversation with S.A.W. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure Kevin would hear it over the sound of the shower. The messages were, well, let's just say they weren't about work. There were heart emojis, kissy faces, messages about missing each other. And then I saw it. A message about meeting up at a hotel. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All the air left my lungs. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I just sat there, staring at the screen, reading the same messages over and over again, hoping that somehow the words would change. They didn't. The sound of the shower stopping snapped me back to reality. I quickly locked the phone and put it back exactly where I'd found it. My mind was racing. What do I do now? Confront him. Pretend I didn't see anything. I felt lost, completely and utterly lost. That night, as we sat down for dinner, I could barely look at Kevin. He was chatting away about his day, completely oblivious to the turmoil inside me. Or was he? Did he know that I knew? Was this all some elaborate game? I couldn't take it anymore. I needed answers, real answers this time. But I also knew that if I confronted Kevin now, he'd just deny everything again. I needed proof. Concrete evidence that he couldn't talk his way out of. So I made a decision that would change everything. The next day, while Kevin was at work, I went to an electronics store. I bought a small hidden camera, the kind you see in spy movies. I felt ridiculous buying it, like I was playing at being a detective. But I was desperate. When I got home, I set up the camera in our bedroom, angling it towards Kevin's side of the bed. I felt sick doing it. Like I was violating our privacy, our trust. But hadn't he already done that? I also installed a tracking app on his phone. It felt wrong, so wrong. But I kept telling myself, if he's innocent, you'll know. If he's not, well, you need to know that too. For the next few days, I lived on edge. Every time Kevin picked up his phone, I wondered if he'd noticed the app. Every time he came into the bedroom, I held my breath, worried he'd spot the camera, but he didn't. He went about his days as usual, completely unaware that his every move was being watched, recorded, tracked. And then, it happened. The notification I'd been dreading and hoping for at the same time. Kevin's phone was at a hotel, the same hotel mentioned in those text messages. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I pulled up the live feed from the hidden camera, and there it was, Kevin, sitting on our bed, talking on the phone. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but I could see the smile on his face, the same smile he used to have for me. As I watched, he got up, grabbed a bag from the closet, a bag I hadn't even known was there, and left the room, left our home. I sat there, staring at the empty room on my phone screen, feeling like my whole world was crumbling around me. This was it, the proof I'd been looking for, the truth I'd been chasing. But now that I had it, I realized something. The truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just breaks your heart into a million tiny pieces. I knew what I had to do next, but I had no idea how much it would cost me, how much it would change me. Because sometimes when you go looking for answers, you find more questions. And sometimes those questions lead you down a path you never expected to take. You know that moment in movies when the detective finally puts all the pieces together. That moment of clarity when everything suddenly makes sense. Well, let me tell you, in real life, it's not nearly as satisfying. It's more like being hit by a truck, repeatedly. After I saw Kevin leave for that hotel, I was a mess. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat there, staring at my phone, watching the little dot that represented my husband move around the city. It was like I was watching my marriage crumble in real time. But I knew I needed more evidence, more proof, because a part of me, a stupid, naive part, still hoped there was an explanation for all this. So I dug deeper. I started with his emails. It took me hours to crack his password, but I finally got in. And oh boy, did I hit the jackpot. There were dozens of emails between Kevin and Sarah, going back months. They were careful, never explicitly mentioning anything incriminating, but the subtext was clear. Late-night meetings, inside jokes, plans for business trips that I knew nothing about. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. An email chain about a jewelry purchase. The same mysterious charge I'd seen on our credit card statement months ago. The one Kevin had claimed was a surprise for me. With shaking hands, I opened the attached receipt. It was for a diamond necklace, expensive, beautiful, and definitely not mine. I felt like I was going to be sick, but I couldn't stop. I kept digging, like picking at a scab, knowing it would hurt but unable to stop myself. I found hotel reservations, restaurant bookings, even a folder of photos. I hesitated before opening it, knowing that whatever was inside would change everything. But I had to know. The photos were, well, let's just say they weren't of landscapes or cute puppies. They were of Kevin and Sarah, together, happy, intimate. There were selfies of them at restaurants, cuddled up on a beach, even one of them kissing in front of what looked like a hotel room. Each photo was like a knife to my heart, but the one that really got me, it was a picture of Sarah wearing the diamond necklace, the one that was supposed to be my surprise. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those photos. Minutes, hours, time seemed to have lost all meaning. I was numb, empty, hollowed out. But then, something inside me snapped. The numbness gave way to anger. White hot, all-consuming anger. How dare he? How fucking dare he do this to me? I wanted to confront him right then and there. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain I was feeling. But I knew I had to be smart about this. I needed a plan. So I did what any self-respecting woman would do in this situation. I poured myself a large glass of wine and started plotting my revenge. First things first, I needed to secure all the evidence. I created a secret email account and forwarded everything I'd found to it. Emails, photos, receipts, everything. Then I made backups of the backups. No way was Kevin weaseling his way out of this one. Next, I called my best friend Lisa. I needed someone to know what was going on, someone who could keep me sane through what I knew was going to be a shitstorm of epic proportions. "Emma, what's wrong? You sound terrible," Lisa said as soon as she picked up. I took a deep breath. "Lisa, I need you to come over now and bring more wine." An hour later, Lisa was sitting on my couch, eyes wide as I showed her everything I'd discovered: the emails, the photos, the receipts. Her face went from shock to anger to sadness and back again. "That bastard," she whispered. "Emma, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" I looked at her, a grim smile on my face. I'm going to make him wish he'd never even thought about cheating on me. We spent the next few hours planning. Lisa, bless her, was all for storming into Kevin's office and causing a scene. But I knew we had to be smarter than that. We needed to hit him where it really hurt: his ego, his wallet, and his precious reputation. By the time Lisa left, we had a solid plan in place. It wasn't pretty, and it certainly wasn't nice. But then again, neither was cheating on your wife. As I lay in bed that night, alone in the house that suddenly felt too big, too empty, I felt a strange mix of emotions: sadness, anger, fear, but also, oddly enough, a sense of excitement. For the first time in months, I felt in control. I had a purpose, a mission. I knew the next few days were going to be hell. Confronting Kevin, dealing with the fallout, facing the end of my marriage. It was all going to be painful beyond belief. But I was ready for it. More than ready. Because the woman who would walk out of this mess, she wasn't going to be the same naive, trusting Emma who had walked into it. No, she was going to be stronger, smarter, and a whole lot less forgiving. Kevin had no idea what was coming for him, but he was about to find out. And let me tell you, it wasn't going to be pretty. As I drifted off to sleep, I found myself smiling. Tomorrow was going to be one hell of a day, and I couldn't wait to get started. You know that feeling when you're about to do something that's going to change your life forever, that mix of terror and exhilaration? Well, multiply that by about 1,000,000, and you'll have some idea of how I felt waking up that morning. I'd barely slept, my mind racing with all the ways this confrontation could go, but I was ready, or at least, as ready as I'd ever be. I got up early, way before Kevin usually did. I wanted to be prepared, to have the home field advantage. I set up my laptop on the kitchen table, all the evidence laid out neatly in folders, emails in one, photos in another, financial records in a third. I even printed out some of the more damning pieces, just for dramatic effect. Then I waited. The sound of Kevin's alarm going off upstairs made my heart race. This was it. No turning back now. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard him humming some tune as he made his way to the kitchen. He had no idea his world was about to implode. "Morning, honey," he said, leaning in to kiss me. I turned my face away, and he froze, finally noticing the setup on the table. "Emma, what's going on?" I took a deep breath. "Sit down, Kevin. We need to talk." He sat looking confused and a little wary. "Is everything okay?" I almost laughed. "Okay? Nothing had been okay for months." "No, Kevin. Everything is not okay." I turned my laptop screen towards him. "I care to explain these?" His face went pale as he saw the emails between him and Sarah displayed on the screen. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Emma, I can explain." "Oh, I'm sure you can." I cut him off. "But before you start spinning more lies, let me show you what else I found." One by one, I laid out the evidence. The emails, the photos, the receipts for hotels and restaurants, and finally, the picture of Sarah wearing the necklace that was supposed to be for me. With each new piece of evidence, Kevin seemed to shrink in his chair. His face cycled through a range of emotions: shock, guilt, anger, fear. "How did you get all this?" he finally managed to ask. "Does it matter?" I shot back. "What matters is that I know. I know everything, Kevin. Every lie, every betrayal, every moment you chose her over me. He tried to reach for my hand. I pulled away. Emma, please. It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I love you, you know that. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Love me. You have a funny way of showing it. Tell me, Kevin, was I supposed to feel loved when you were buying jewelry for another woman? Or maybe when you were taking her to all those fancy restaurants you never took me to? It's not like that, he protested weakly. Sarah, it just happened. I never meant to hurt you. But you did, I said, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to stay strong. You hurt me in ways I didn't even know were possible. And for what? A fling with a coworker? Kevin stood up, trying to close the distance between us. It's over, I swear, I'll end it. We can work this out, can't we? For better or worse, remember. I laughed, but it was a hollow sound. For better or worse. I don't think a worse was supposed to include you screwing your coworker, Kevin. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I had to say next. I want a divorce. The words hung in the air between us, heavy and final. Kevin's face crumpled. Emma, no, please, we can fix this. I'll do anything. Counseling, therapy, whatever you want. Just please, don't throw away our marriage. For a moment, I wavered. A tiny part of me wanted to believe him, wanted to think we could somehow move past this. But then I remembered the photos, the secret meetings, the lies upon lies. Our marriage? I said quietly. You threw it away the moment you decided to cheat. I'm just making it official. I pushed a folder across the table towards him. These are divorce papers. I've already called a lawyer. You can either sign them now, or we can drag this out in court. Your choice. Kevin stared at the folder like it was a live grenade. You can't be serious, Emma, please, let's talk about this. We're done talking, Kevin. I've heard enough of your lies to last a lifetime. He opened the folder with shaking hands, his eyes scanning the documents inside. You're asking for the house and half of everything. Emma, come on. Consider it the price of your freedom, I said coldly. Unless you'd rather I take this to your boss. I'm sure they'd be very interested to know about your special projects with Sarah. His head snapped up, eyes wide with panic. You wouldn't? Try me. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then slowly, Kevin reached for a pen. As I watched him sign away our marriage, I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just a cold, hard certainty that I was doing the right thing. When he was done, Kevin looked up at me, tears in his eyes. I'm sorry. Emma, I truly am. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Then I picked up the papers and walked out of the kitchen. Out of our home. Out of our marriage. As I stepped outside, the morning sun warm on my face, I took a deep breath. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. And I was ready for whatever came next. You know how they say it's always darkest before the dawn? Well, let me tell you. After that confrontation with Kevin, I was living in the pitch black. The first few days after he moved out were a blur. I wandered around my house like a ghost, touching things that used to be ours, now just painful reminders of what I'd lost. His coffee mug still in the sink, his favorite sweater draped over a chair. It was like living in a museum of my failed marriage. I thought I'd feel relieved, maybe even triumphant after confronting Kevin. But instead, I just felt empty, hollow. Like someone had scooped out all my insides and left me as nothing but a shell. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of our marriage in my head. Where did it all go wrong? Was there something I could have done differently? Was it my fault? I started doubting everything. Maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe we could have worked it out. Maybe I should call Kevin, tell him I'd made a mistake. But then I'd remember the photos, the emails, the lies, and the anger would come rushing back hot and fierce. But it never lasted long. The anger would fade, and I'd be left with nothing but an overwhelming sadness. I stopped going to work, stopped answering calls from friends, stopped eating mostly. I just stopped. Lisa tried to help. She'd come over with food, try to get me to go out, to do something, anything, but I couldn't. It was like I was stuck, frozen in this moment of pain and confusion. "Emma, you need to snap out of this," Lisa said one day, after finding me still in my pajamas at 3 in the afternoon. "You can't let him win like this." I looked at her, not really seeing her. "Win? There are no winners here, Lisa, just losers, and I'm the biggest loser of all." She sat down next to me on the couch, taking my hand in hers. "No, sweetie, you're not a loser. You're a survivor. You're strong. You just need to remember that." But I didn't feel strong. I felt weak, pathetic, broken. Days turned into weeks. The divorce proceedings moved forward, but I barely paid attention. My lawyer handled most of it. I just signed where I was told to sign, nodded when I was supposed to nod. I started having panic attacks. They'd come out of nowhere, leaving me gasping for air, feeling like the world was closing in on me. The first time it happened, I thought I was dying. Part of me wished I was. I saw Kevin a few times, at meetings with our lawyers. He looked good, put together, like he was moving on with his life while I was falling apart. It made me hate him even more. One night, after a particularly bad day of staring at old photos and crying until I had no tears left, I found myself in the bathroom, staring at a bottle of sleeping pills. It would be so easy, I thought, just to make it all stop, to not have to feel this pain anymore. I opened the bottle, poured the pills into my hand. They looked so small, so harmless, just little white circles that could end all of this. But as I stood there, pills in hand, something stopped me. A tiny voice in the back of my head, barely a whisper. "You're stronger than this," it said. I looked up, catching my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, pale, gaunt, with dark circles under her eyes. This wasn't me. This couldn't be me. In that moment, something snapped. A spark of the old Emma, the strong Emma, flared to life. I threw the pills in the toilet and flushed, watching them swirl away. I splashed cold water on my face, really looking at myself in the mirror for the first time in weeks. "Enough," I said out loud. "Enough of this." I walked out of the bathroom and straight to my phone. I called my doctor, made an appointment. Then I called a therapist. It was time to get help, to start putting myself back together. The next morning, I got up early. I showered, put on real clothes, even a little makeup. I went to a cafe and ordered a real breakfast, not just coffee. As I sat there, slowly eating my eggs and toast, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. It wasn't much, just a tiny glimmer, but it was there, and I was going to hold on to it with everything I had. I knew the road ahead wasn't going to be easy. I had a lot of healing to do, a lot of work to put myself back together. But for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could do it. As I left the cafe, the sun was shining. I took a deep breath, feeling the warmth on my face. It wasn't much, but it was a start. A new day, a new beginning. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if I'd ever truly get over what Kevin had done. But I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting him destroy me. It was time to start living again. Time to remember who Emma really was. Because the truth is, rock bottom has a basement, and I'd been living in it. But now it was time to start climbing out, one small step at a time. You know that saying, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, let me tell you, I was about to become the strongest version of myself I'd ever been. After that morning at the cafe, something inside me shifted. It wasn't an overnight transformation, mind you. There were still bad days when I couldn't get out of bed, when the pain of Kevin's betrayal felt as fresh as the day I discovered it. But those days became fewer and farther between. I threw myself into therapy with a vengeance. Twice a week, I'd sit in Dr. Anderson's office, unpacking years of emotions, fears, and insecurities. It wasn't easy. There were sessions where I'd do nothing but cry, others where I'd rage against Kevin, against the unfairness of it all. But slowly, surely, I started to heal. One day, about 3 months into therapy, Dr. Anderson asked me a question that changed everything. "Emma," she said, leaning forward in her chair, "who are you without Kevin?" I opened my mouth to answer, then closed it again. Who was I without Kevin? I'd been Kevin's wife for so long. I'd almost forgotten who Emma was. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept turning Dr. Anderson's question over and over in my mind. Who was I? What did I want? What made me happy? The next morning, I woke up with a plan. I was going to rediscover Emma. I started small. I signed up for a cooking class, something I'd always wanted to do but never had the time for. The first few classes were a disaster. I nearly set the kitchen on fire trying to make a simple pasta dish. But by the end of the course, I was whipping up gourmet meals like a pro. Encouraged by my culinary success, I branched out. I joined a book club, started taking yoga classes, even tried my hand at painting. Some things I loved, others not so much. Turns out, I'm a terrible painter. But with each new experience, I felt a little bit more like myself. As I focused on rebuilding my life, something unexpected happened. My nutrition practice, which had been floundering in the wake of my divorce, started to pick up. Clients who had drifted away came back. New ones started to appear, referred by friends of friends who had heard about the amazing nutritionist who had turned her life around. I threw myself into my work with renewed passion. I started a blog, sharing healthy recipes and nutrition tips. To my surprise, it took off. People seemed to connect not just with my advice, but with my story of resilience and self-discovery. One day, out of the blue, I got a call from a local morning show. They wanted me to come on and talk about nutrition and personal transformation. Me, on TV. The old Emma would have been terrified. But this new Emma, she was ready for the challenge. The day of the show, I was a bundle of nerves. But as soon as the camera started rolling, something clicked. I found myself talking not just about nutrition, but about my journey, about finding strength in the darkest of times. After the show, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. More TV appearances followed. Then a book deal. Suddenly, I wasn't just Emma the nutritionist, I was Emma the author, Emma the motivational speaker, Emma the survivor. As my career took off, I started to realize something. The pain of Kevin's betrayal, which had once consumed me, had faded to a dull ache. It was still there, probably always would be, but it no longer defined me. One evening, about a year after that fateful confrontation in our kitchen, I ran into Kevin at a local supermarket. He looked different, older, somehow, tired. "Emma," he said, his voice a mix of surprise and something else. Regret, maybe. "You look great," I smiled, and to my surprise, I meant it. "Thanks, Kevin. I feel great." We chatted for a few minutes, awkward small talk about the weather and mutual friends. As I was about to leave, Kevin stopped me. "Emma, I'm sorry for everything. I was an idiot. I threw away the best thing in my life, and I'll regret it forever." I looked at him, this man who had once been my whole world, and I felt nothing. No anger, no pain, just a calm acceptance. "Thank you for saying that, Kevin," I said softly. "I hope you find happiness." As I walked away, I realized something. I was happy, truly, genuinely happy. Not because of any man, but because of me. Because I had faced my darkest hour and come out stronger on the other side. That night, as I sat on my porch, sipping a glass of wine and looking out at the stars, I couldn't help but smile. Life had thrown me one hell of a curveball, but I'd knocked it out of the park. I thought back to that broken woman I'd been a year ago, the one who could barely get out of bed. She seemed like a stranger now. In her place was a woman who was strong, confident, and above all, happy. As for Kevin, last I heard, he'd been passed over for a promotion at work. Turns out, sleeping with your coworker isn't great for career advancement. Sarah had moved on to greener pastures, leaving Kevin alone with his regrets. But me, I was just getting started. I had a best-selling book, a thriving practice, and a whole life ahead of me. And the best part? I had myself, the real Emma, the one who had been there all along, just waiting to be rediscovered. So here's to second chances, to new beginnings, and to the strength we never knew we had. Because sometimes, the happiest endings come after the stories we thought were over.